Do people really change? That's a question I hear a lot, but the answer might be different from what you think. In this video, we're going to be talking about why do people change? What is it that actually changes or evolves in them? But before we go into the video, I will quickly just introduce myself. My name is Alex Golovko. I am on my own journey to build my confidence, my boundaries, have better self-worth, and I'm also a yoga teacher, both on the movement side, but also on the philosophy side. And I've been using a lot of these tools to help me with this process, with building my confidence and release my people-pleasing tendencies. And on this channel, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm talking about women empowerment, how to build better boundaries, how to be more confident, how to build better relationships as well with people, both your close ones, but also your friends. And I'm applying a lot of the yoga philosophy and just my own learnings through my journey and making it super digestible and super practical for you. So if this sounds like something you're interested in, please consider subscribing and commenting or liking my videos. I really love when you comment and you share your own experiences or just discuss the topic with me. And it also helps me to cater to your needs and really create the content that you really want to see. And for those of you who are returning viewers, I want to again thank you so much for being here. You're really the reason why I'm creating all of this stuff. So without further ado, let's dive into our today's topic. So I hear a lot of people say, oh, that person changed. But what is it exactly that we think of when we notice this thing? What is changing in people? The first thing, really the first thing people usually notice is the way that person enters in a relationship with you. So their relationship with you, essentially. So they might be less available or more available, or show up more often or less often, or just generally there's a change in dynamic in the relationship with you. So that's the first thing that people notice, obviously, right? But then that can be also a broader change. It can be a change that reflects in other relationships as well. So it could be just the way that the person shows up to the world. It could be the way that they present themselves. It could be the way that they visually appear. So it could have been, for instance, taking more care of themselves or less care of themselves, or showing off just a bit more authentic or a bit less authentic. But this can be a bit deeper, so people can also start changing their patterns in life or things that they are known for by their friends. For instance, they're known to repeat short-term relationships or being afraid to settle, let's say. And what happens is that this person is then put into a certain category. Let's take an example. That's an eternal bachelor, or that is a person that's having trouble to have a long-term relationship. So this is a label that we tend to put on a person based on what their patterns seem to be, and that person seems to repeat that pattern. And then from one day to the other, suddenly that person seems to have overcome that pattern, and suddenly they are not that predictable, because suddenly they're not behaving like you're expecting them to behave according to their label. Or that person was, for instance, partying a lot, and now suddenly they reduced the frequency, or they just see people less. And we tend to assume that, oh, they've changed, or something in them changed. So let's talk about the second point here. So what actually happens when a person changes? And what changes exactly? So first of all, let's address the elephant in the room. Is it actually possible to change? And the answer is yes, it is. We are neuroflexible, which means that our neurons, or the way we are deeply wired by our nervous system, is flexible. It's adaptable. It's just that the longer a certain pathway has been established for, the more difficult it is sometimes to change that pattern and to create a new one. But that doesn't mean that it's not changeable. Everything is changeable. The only way to do that is through will to address whatever it is that you want to address about yourself. So a statement like, "This is just how I am," is actually completely invalid, because a more accurate way to say it would be, "This is how I am now," meaning I might change in the future, or the way I'm behaving might change. Everything can change. But again, all of it is really dependent on the willpower or on the decision of the person to actually do something about that thing that characterizes them. So again, I'm repeating, we are neuroflexible, and it is possible to rewire our entire system by going through deep adjustments, deep work to change the patterns or the ways we are currently programmed. Now, it's important to distinguish two types of changes or two types of evolution of a person, and that you can be noticing from the outside. One evolution is actually the unconscious one. So that means that the person doesn't really choose, or they're not really aware of the fact that they are changing their behavior. So this is a kind of a passive change, and usually this is connected to whatever is surrounding them, an environment that they're facing, and they're feeling like this is the way to behave in that type of environment. And this is just a natural shift that is happening without them paying attention to it or consciously directing that change. Sometimes this is because there is a difficult situation around them, and this change is basically helping them cope with that difficult situation. And very frequently, in addition to an external situation, more specifically, this is directed by other people or close relationships. It could be even your romantic relationship that is actually acting on you in a way where you are now adapting to that other person and changing your own ways to fit into that relationship. But because these changes are not actually conscious decisions, a lot of times they can be detrimental to a person. And this is because the person is not really aware that this is happening to them. And in that sense, they're kind of losing their own power. They're not guiding their life. They're losing their responsibility. So this is where unconscious change is something that a person is not necessarily deciding, and it's something that is not very frequently a good thing for that person. And then there is the second type of change, obviously, the conscious change. So something the person takes into their own hands and now decides that they want to impact on their life. So I mentioned that before, the notion of decision. It's usually rooted in a self-observation. So it's something that comes from either basic or quite advanced form of self-awareness. So you're starting to notice a pattern in your life, for instance, or you're starting to realize some relationship is not that healthy for you anymore. Or you're starting to realize you need to prioritize yourself more. And to be able to do this, this is where a conscious decision comes in to change something in your life, to arrive to a new state. This is a different type of action. So this is a conscious action. And by doing this, you are actually gaining power as opposed to the unconscious change. So you are consciously and proactively trying to overcome something that has been limiting you in the past, or you're trying to discover yourself more. These are all type of changes that could lead to modified behaviors and modified relationships with people. So they could all appear from the external point of view as the person has changed. In both those cases, this looks like that. Whether it is an unconscious change or if it's a conscious change, from the outer view, it looks like the person has modified their ways in a way, and they seem to be interested by other things, or seeing less of some people and seeing more of some people. But it's important to understand where that change is coming from. And to do that, it's important to understand what exactly is it that changes in a person. Is there everything that can change? Or is there some sort of core that's more or less like unshakable, unchangeable inside of us? And that's a very important question. That's a question that's been asked, I think, in most philosophies and most ways to see the world of religions and belief systems. Everywhere we ask ourselves that question: what is it that we are, right? But in most of these answers and most of the ways to see the being is a complexity that emerges. You understand that a person has many layers. It's not just a one-dimensional character. And one very interesting research around that I would really recommend you to look into is Richard Schwartz's internal family systems, or IFS, method or methodology. This is something that's been applicable to therapy, and a lot of therapists use that and study this. But essentially, it's a theory that says that imagine ourselves a little bit more like an onion. So something which is multi-layered and that has some sort of deep core in it. And imagine those layers as layers that were built during our life. So various experiences, various situations in our childhood have shaped us. So we have created layer by layer, kind of surrounding that inner core of the onion with various new resources that helped us at the time to cope with the situation that we were facing. And with each layer comes almost like a new type of personality, whether it is a very outgoing personality or a very introverted personality. All of these things are acquired with what we experience. So it's not something that was there prior, but it's something that was built. So if we have this understanding of a person being fundamentally whole in a way, but that requires to go deeper to understand its true nature, it's a different understanding from something that is fundamentally broken and needs some additions to it to be whole. So in that way, when we change, what does happen? Well, it can mean two things. Either we are consciously doing the change, and in that case, probably we are removing layers or peeling off layers of that onion, or trying to see clearly what is at the center of us. What is it that is our core? Something that is not changeable. Something that is our, one can say, true self, or you can call it your soul, or whatever you believe in. You can call this your innermost self. And another way to change is basically to add layers. And that's most often something that's unconscious. And that's most often something that is connected to facing a difficult situation, and a new layer, a new coping mechanism, if you want, is built up, and a new type of behavior is created, not because this is the new you, but it's because it's that new layer of protection that protects you from the outer world, and that distorts actually even more who that person really is, because it adds on one more layer of complexity, hiding even more the real you that's at the core of that onion. All right, so I think that can give you quite a good idea, like what actually happens when a person changes. It could be a good thing, but it could be quite of a bad thing. But so in both those cases, what's important to understand is that what is the most important part is awareness of that person. So awareness of something happening, right? Because when we go through adding additional layers to our core, to our onion, let's say, that means we are getting away from who we truly are. But when we're retrieving with awareness additional layers that don't serve us anymore, we are going to our deep core, to going back to our real true self and our real soul, let's say, where our calling is. So from the external point of view, when you're looking at your friend and you're seeing that they have, from the external perspective, changed, if you want to really be there for them, first thing is to understand whether this is a conscious change or a non-conscious change that is dictated by their external relationship with people. So that's where it's very delicate, because to help them, the best way is to listen and to understand what is it that they're going through, and not over advising them. And this is another video where I talk about not over advising people, because at the end it's their own decision. But what you can tell them is once, maybe twice, tell them what your perspective is on the situation they're going through, and that you're feeling that they're not being conscious when they are doing this evolution. That is something that helps them cope with whatever they're facing. You might tell them once or twice, but if you see that this doesn't land or they're not ready to listen to you, it's not the point to continue with this advice. All right, so that's just from the external perspective, what to do when you see when a person does evolve or change. Now, I talked about this core or center of the onion quite a few times and called it self or true self or the soul. So this is also something that the research of Richard Schwartz actually points out, is that from all his years and years of clinical tests and working with all types of characters, so he worked with mentally ill people, he worked with prisoners, he worked with what we can call average people from the middle class, let's say, and he noticed something, that every single person inside of them has this core or center that has innate qualities, and these qualities are quite consistent from a person to another. Even considering all the external differences one individual to another can have, whether geographic location from where they are, or ethnical difference, or like life difference, that social status difference, all of human beings have that same core inner self, which has similar qualities. And these qualities, he calls them the 8 C's. First of all, this is compassion. So this core is deeply compassionate with itself, but with others as well. It's curious. It is interested and intrigued by things that it wants to discover, and particularly connected to their deep purpose. It has calm. It's inner calm. So when you achieve that place, you know that you're there because this is innately a calm space. It's a place that doesn't overthink. It's a place that is peaceful and at ease. It's a clear space. It's a place that has deep clarity on what should be done, what's the next steps for that person. It's also quite confident. It is actually knowing the worth innately of the person, of the self. It's also creative. So when in that space of the inner self, the creativity actually comes easily. Because what that means is when you're not in the inner self, that's where the creativity is obstructed. It is quite courageous, so again, does not feel fear, and is quite trusting that everything is gonna be okay, whatever happens, kind of thing. And finally, it's deeply connected. So it's connected to the outer world while not being influenced by it in a way that it loses itself. So this is the 8 C's, the qualities of the inner self, that actually does not change. And this, as discovered by this research, is basically something we all have. So it's not about reaching it, or it's not about achieving that state and changing into that state. That's where the word change is actually not that appropriate anymore. It's about unwinding or revealing that state by peeling the onion, removing all of these layers that were built over time and that we hold on to, but maybe they don't serve us anymore, because a lot of the times these are protective layers that we built due to difficult times in our lives, which actually prevent us to achieve what we really want. So they're kind of going on an overdrive to protect us, going beyond what they need to do. So although they do have a purpose, they do have this protective interest towards us, they also go overboard. So they protect us a bit too much. And sometimes they lead us to go into patterns as well, without consciously choosing to do that. So this is where unpeeling the onion and consciously taking the decision to change our ways, change the patterns, and unveil what our true self really is the best thing you could try to do with your life. So I hope this gives you a bit more understanding as to what it means when we talk about a person that changes and what it can mean when they do change. So there can be two ways. Either it's the good way or the bad way. But in both cases, the only way you can help that person or accompany that person in their process of evolving is to deeply listen to their perspective, be there for them, understand them. And if you see that this is something that is happening to them without them noticing, without them consciously taking that route, that's where you can actually point it out to them without pushing, but just to make sure that maybe one day they will take awareness and those words will resonate with them. Maybe not straight away, but maybe another day. Thank you for arriving at the end of the video. Super grateful that you stayed around. And if you liked it, please consider liking, commenting. If you have any situation that you faced with people changed around you, whether it's family, friends, and you'd like to get a bit of an insight about whether this was a good change, so peeling the onion out, or a bad change or adding more layers to that onion. So just comment under the video and also consider subscribing to my channel if you want more content like that. I also recommend to you watching another video of mine, which is how to not over-advise people and why it's a problem. I'll link it here. And finally, if you want to just learn how to be more confident in your relationships and with yourself, I have a free masterclass that I'm also linking in the description of this video, which is around building your self-confidence, and it's around building boundaries and having healthier relationships and more balanced relationships with people around you. It's called the Confidence Blueprint, and it's linked underneath here. All right, thank you so much for sticking around again, and see you in the next video.